Uh, Always good to see you, my friend. I was glad that we were able to get some time together. And, as I respect you a great deal and have a lot of passion for leadership, as do you, I'd love to pick your brain on some topics today. Obviously, we're in a very interesting year that I think is taken us in different directions from a sales and leadership perspective. We've had to really challenge the norms, and I'd love to know from you how you think your style has most been influenced, impacted, and maybe changed throughout the course of this year.
No, first off, Carson, it's a pleasure to be here, and as always, I'm the lucky guy to be talking to you, Carson, because you are one of the best that there is when it comes to sales. So, looking forward to sharing ideas with you today and having an open dialogue. When it comes to 2020, definitely an interesting year when it comes to sales, and the interesting part is, I've worked in digital sales and field sales as well, Carson. And, it's interesting to see how those two, different areas have really sort of intermeshed now, because you can't go on site. You can't really spend time visiting the customer. So you're forced to do all your deals over Teams or whatever online system that there is. So it's changed the way we do sales, but it's not something that's new, because most people that are in field sales had to do something more digitally or from an inside sales perspective in the past. So it's forced us to go back to those key elements that we've been successful in the past. But and closing very large deals, Carson, I think is the interesting part, because in the past it would be impossible to close an 8-figure, 9-figure deal if you were completely online. But now there's no choice. And so it's interesting how people are able to adapt to this. As a leader, Carson, I think there's a lot of challenges to have people motivated, keep people connected, making sure that, when you're managing a virtual team or working with a virtual team, it changes the dynamic, getting people engaged, having people still part of a culture, having people still feel part of the team. There's a lot of interesting things to do there, but there's ways to sort of deal with those things, in my opinion. I mean, what are your thoughts, Carson?
I love that. I mean, there's a lot to unpack out of that, because you hit on some very important elements, specifically, culture and how you can maintain a company culture. And I think you and I have both seen some of the migration toward a digital sales environment, and some of the value that those organizations can bring, but also some of the hindrances that can inherently exist when you've got a digital only type of approach. But right now, that is the norm. And in some ways, I'm fascinated by it, because there's no expectation around a face-to-face. So it's business as usual. And I think that it's a shift in mindset. And because there's no expectation of that, I think in some ways it changes the dynamic between the buyer and seller, and also from a leadership perspective when you're interacting with other people. And I think what's been the most amazing for me from a leadership standpoint this year is that nobody's out of reach. I think before, and I was thinking about this earlier, before, you always think about kind of your circle of folks that you interact with most. And it was very commonplace for me to be in the office and run into the same group of people, have lunch with the same group of people. That's not the norm anymore. And I find myself talking more to people that are not geographically close to me now than ever before, and probably less to some of the people that I just happen to run into at the office that I was talking to very frequently. So from a leadership perspective, I think it's really opened my scope as far as some of the people that I've been able to interact with. And things like this, like a conversation with you were always at my disposal. But I mean, I feel like I've talked to you more this year than probably the prior years outside of when we worked together. And the other thing, like, one of my best friends is in the Navy and he's in Bahrain. And it didn't ever really dawn on me like how easy it would be to have a video conversation with him, until video became the norm of everything that I was doing in my life, in my business, with Faith, interacting with, services via an online apparatus. And so now I feel like everybody in the world is really at your fingertips. So from a leadership standpoint, that's a big responsibility, first off, because you've got to make sure that you are, still keeping people as a part of that unit, but that you're also not afraid of empowering them to do their job appropriately. Because I've read a lot of articles. I think micromanagement is probably up during times like this. So I think you hit on a lot of really important elements of how to keep that culture instilled during a time that is unlike anything that we've ever encountered, without a question. And one of the next questions that I was going to ask you was, what do you find is really working for sellers today? You were hitting on some of the large deals, right? I mean, it was unheard of to have some of the, obviously multi-million-dollar deals and deals of large magnitude to be progressed and even closed completely sight unseen. Obviously there's video and there, you can pick up the phone and still talk to people. Some people still do that. But how have you seen deals happen? What's changed in that? And then what do you think are the most important elements to making sure that you can get a deal like that done in a virtual world?
No, absolutely, Carson. I think that's you touched on some really important elements of sales and COVID, which is a team. It's so important for folks to really be getting the support that they need to be successful as sales reps. Sellers already, I mean, it's not an easy job when you're trying to close a 8 or 9-figure deal. And, usually, when pre-COVID, there was a lot of ways to get out to the customer, visit the customer, relationship building things. I'll tell you, we had a big deal that I was working when I was at Google earlier this year. And one of my reps, part of the things that really differentiated really, give me 1 second, Carson. Let me change my internet network real quick. See if that'll fix things. All right. Let's see if that's better.
I think so.
Sorry, I was getting the bad network quality thing. So I'll start right there from where we had left off. So Carson, I mean, when you look at COVID's changed sales in many ways. So for sales reps to be successful, you're going to have to provide additional support. But the sales reps themselves also have to sell differently. Selling virtually requires a new level of relentlessness, a new level of perseverance, a new level of grit that you might not necessarily have to have found in previous times. So I worked on an 8-figure deal with one of my sales reps at Google earlier this year. And I think the difference there really was the sales rep just really going out of his way to find ways to, connect with the customer, to remain online with the customer and keep things going. I'll tell you, when things are virtual, it's very easy for customers to go dark on you. And that is something that happened in the deal. The customer did go dark for quite some period, but the rep did not give up. The rep brought in new resources. I think, Carson, to your point, you have access to resources virtually, which makes it a lot easier for a customer visit than when you're not virtual. So, for an executive sponsor to come in on a deal, it might have been a little bit more difficult because, executive sponsors have so little time when it comes to directors, VPs, to get involved in these large deals. But now when everything's virtual, it's very easy to just, bring in these sponsors and bring in the additional support that you need to be successful, without having to have them travel to the customer site to have that big meeting. So that really made a difference. I think the other thing was, providing the guidance, the tools, and everything else. Really you have to spend time with your reps to make sure they have everything they need to be successful. And I think you have to do it more so now during COVID because there's less room for error, less room for these sorts of things when you don't really have the chance to have that face-to-face in the same way. But I do think, Carson, in many ways, things have adjusted quite a bit. People are now camera on when they're talking. You get to still see people's body language. So as a sales rep, it takes new skills, new capabilities to really be locked in and be successful. But it's something that's possible if you do things the right way, if that makes sense.
A new level of relentlessness. I love
Yes.
that you said that, and it's so true. And I think as sellers, we're always tasked, and as leaders, we're always tasked with evolving. Sometimes I think that comes naturally through different points in your career and just different experiences that you have. They mold you and they define you. But this year has forced everybody to change, whether you liked it or not. Whether you had, it was a natural inflection point in a lot of people's careers. There were a lot of people that were forced to look for a different type of work or parlay their skills into a different way of doing business. We were doing social selling years ago, and trying to connect with folks digitally and using that to complement, because it's never been an end all be all. Social selling opens doors, but it doesn't complete the transaction. It doesn't build the relationship. It doesn't sustain the relationship. And so that was something that was already in a lot of people's tool sets, but this year has forced us to take that entire relationship online. And something else you said really resonated was about that ability to pull people in and really leverage a wide array of resources. Something that I've really learned over the last several years, being so much into the enterprise sales element, is working as part of a really, really broad team. I've worked as part of great teams in the past, but certainly in my days within the last several years at Microsoft, a lot of time working with broad teams. And what I found the most amazing this year is that ability to even just call an audible. I may be on the phone with someone, and there may be a moment where I need to pull somebody into a session. They're not already a part of that session, but I have that ability to work on the fly, to be able to call a specialist in, phone a friend, and bring somebody into a meeting in real time. I can IM them, I can call them and just add them in immediately. And I've done that multiple times throughout this year, and it has a huge impact. So I think key to anything in sales is understanding your playing field. There's a lot to be said for being a student of the game and being a good salesperson and being a good communicator and being a good relationship builder. But something else in that is that ability to understand all the parameters of the playing field. It's kind of like playing baseball and knowing exactly when and where to hit that bloop single, because it can make all the difference in the world, even though it isn't swinging for the fences. And understanding the parameters, how you get paid, what your company cares about, what the customer cares about, and being able to use all of that so that everybody wins, I find that to be critical. It looks different this year, but knowing how to use these resources in an effective way is what I think makes people effective in this type of a selling environment.
Oh, absolutely, Carson. I completely agree with you. I think you have to have a clear strategy when you're doing these things. You have to be able to, pull everyone out on your team. The only way you're going to be successful in this environment is to be a team seller. I think this has made it more difficult for you to be a lone wolf than any time in the past. I know that's definitely a seller persona that I think it's going to be very difficult to work with in COVID, because the reality is that to be successful, you have to pull in every trick out of your hat, every resource that's on your team, and really be digging deep to be successful, if that makes sense. So completely agree with you, Carson.
Yeah. No, completely agree. And I would ask you, you've interacted with a lot of sellers this year, and I'm curious, what do you think has been the common theme as far as what's most top of mind? What's at the pulse of sellers and leaders right now? What are they thinking about? What are they asking about? What do they need coaching on? What are they worried about? And how can we best influence and impact right now?
Yeah. Carson, I think I've found two major camps of people. One that are affected by COVID and one that are, really responding to COVID. The first group is a group I think that's almost at a point where talking to salespeople, they're, sort of disheartened, or they're let down, or they're allowing COVID to control their story. They're allowing COVID and the changes and the difficulties bring them down. They're not closing business. They're blaming the lack of being able to close business on the changes that have happened. Then there's this other group, that I mentioned to you before, that's raised that level of relentlessness that we mentioned. This group of people is taking on the opportunity that's there, finding ways to find customers in their book of business that there is still some potential opportunity with, and they're not taking no for an answer. They're not giving up. They're not focusing in on the negatives, and they're really trying to focus in on what they can do to be successful. And those are the sellers that I think they not only thrived during COVID, they were the ones that were thriving prior to COVID as well. The difficulty is there's some sellers that were good prior to COVID that are using this as an excuse, or making it more difficult for themselves. Obviously, COVID's very difficult. Obviously, it's changed the playing field. Obviously, it's more difficult to close deals in COVID. That doesn't mean you just give up. At the end of the day, you're a salesperson. Sales is not easy. Selling a deal is not easy, no matter what the environment is. Sales is, you don't get paid all this money to close sales for it to be an easy thing that you just go in and make a transaction. So when you realize that and you recognize that and you sort of use the fuel as a fire, you can make things happen. And I think that to me is a major difference that I've noticed in terms of the successful sales reps and the other group of sales reps that's out there.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. I can say that there's always going to be changes in industry, changes in business. Now, this is one where, I like to say not everybody's been infected, but everybody's been affected by the circumstances of this year. Everybody knows people that have been infected. Everybody knows businesses that have been massively affected. And we've all felt some kind of shift and change. But on the same token, I worked in the Yellow Pages business a long time ago. Talk about a business that was turned on its head. We went from the print Yellow Pages to an online version, and it was really all about how quickly can we evolve, and frankly, how quickly can we replicate what Google was doing at the time, when Google was already Google. And you saw where that story ended, but it challenged a lot of those people that were used to going out, playing golf, doing the handshake, and closing deals with high margins. And that business went away, and the people that weren't able to evolve and adapt were no longer in that game. Flash forward to today. What you just said is spot on, because we have to adapt. And don't get me wrong. There are mornings, absolutely, where I wake up and I'm bummed I can't go to the office, and I'm bummed I can't go out and sit right across the table from clients, and I can't shake hands, and I can't go to lunches, and I can't do really anything that I was doing before, because there were, I don't think many people are in sales because they don't enjoy a lot of those key elements of it, and we can't do a lot of those things. So the adaptation is critical, but at the same time, if you look at the fact that you can still connect with anybody that you want, you look at the fact and follow the bouncing ball. I think you can be successful. Look at what's needed right now. People are working remotely. People are leveraging data like no other time in the history of the world. So if you look to where these things are trending and you look to where the need is, it's simple supply and demand. And especially, as I coach some of these folks that are now looking for work, or, if I coach folks that are sellers that are just looking for career advice, it's all about kind of follow that bouncing ball. Look at where things are going. Remote work is not going to go anywhere. We're going to have a hybrid work from here on out. Furthermore, data, it's a land grab. We have worked for and continue to work for companies that leverage data and SaaS apparatus to to really manage a lot of different workforce tools and data. And I think you'll continue to see a land grab to figure out how can we not only get that into the cloud, but also how can we monopolize and capitalize on the data and the insights and things of that stature to make better decisions, to scan these types of massive amounts of data in order to make real-time decisions and have better insights. And so that's where a lot of these things are going. So yeah, I tell people often, if you follow that bouncing ball and you figure out, what, even just kind of trying to take a look into what 2021 might look like, go where you think that momentum is shifting. If you can parlay your skills effectively into those types of areas, you'll be successful. But you have to accept, just like a relationship ending, just like a bad time in your life, you have to accept the past is past. Things forward aren't going to look the same. Accept it, move on, move into the new realm, and you can absolutely find success. And not every day is easy. But you've got to find the things that you're passionate about and that you enjoy and bring them into what you do, no matter what that looks like.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a few things, Carson, but I'd like to dig a little bit deeper with you. I mean, you have been sort of recognized for being a top 1% seller for quite some time. You've also been able to be a great storyteller when it comes to sales. You've published a number of fantastic books on sales from a storytelling perspective. Maybe you can share with some of the folks what you think are maybe 2 or 3 key insights or lessons for sellers who might be struggling, from your perspective, what they can do to utilize storytelling or maybe something else to push to be in the top 1%. Because I know you had a great year this year at Microsoft and you've continued to be successful as well. But maybe you can share with the folks some of the secrets behind your top 1% continued success, as well as maybe some stories in there as well.
Thank you for that. And I think, I'm going to turn it to you as soon as I'm concluded, because you've had quite a meteoric rise yourself. So I think a lot of people would love to emulate what you've done with your career, with your branding, and how much value you've been able to add at multiple organizations. And I think what I always try to tell people is that the types of things that guys like you and me do, they're not unattainable. I get up every morning and frankly, for the last several months, because I now work in the healthcare field, I've been in my basement, and it's been very, very minimal opportunity to get out, maybe even see anyone for that matter from a career perspective. And so, like you said, I think it's all the more critical to rely on those stories and being able to make that feel real and make that feel tangible for organizations. But the same fundamentals apply. And I think where it's very easy to get caught in a rut, because anytime you try something new, if it doesn't go exactly the way you feel that you want it to go, or that you think it's going to go, you're at a crossroads immediately. It's either I can continue to do this uncomfortable thing that I think might pay off, but it isn't yet, or I can go back to my comfortable way of mediocrity. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, choose that path, but I have always chosen the other path. And there's been a lot of times too where, I've had my ups and downs in my career. You don't have a 20-year career in sales and leadership and have everything always come up roses. But I will tell you, and here was a conversation I was actually having earlier today with another person that I respect in our business, is there's a certain element of strategic risk. And you've got to be able to, especially in a time like this, get outside of your comfort zone. And that's where the storytelling matters all the more, because first off, you've got to amplify and enhance your audience. If you're in front of, say, 5, 10 people at an organization as a norm before COVID, why not blow that up? One of my most prominent clients, I have hundreds of contacts, and I've spoken to probably half of them over the past year. And that wouldn't have been the norm previously. We typically gravitate toward a handful of people. So not only do you want your story to be sound, but you want to open up and attempt to make the connection point with as many of the influencers as humanly possible. Now, every organization, obviously, they have a C-suite, but there's a lot of VPs, directors, people that are stakeholders, that are influencers, and they're well connected in their organization. It's your job to figure that out and who those people are. And ultimately, I think the stories, the beauty of stories is that it's the book keeps being written, because when I meet with somebody today, I'm able to talk about some of the amazing things that I've seen us do, even stuff that you and I did years ago. But I'm able to talk about things that are happening right now, what organizations are looking to do. And that's why it's also very important to connect internally, because you want to understand all of your resources. You want to understand the wealth of knowledge that exists. You want to understand the stories of what's possible. I've been in a lot of industries in my career, and that's been irrelevant. Sellers are sellers. And if you understand the core concepts of knowing how to get people in the boat with you, you understand the parameters of your role, the value that your company can bring, the resources that you're able to deliver to clients. If you understand all those things, it's ultimately your job to sell them on what's possible so that they understand, to tell that story of, hey, this is what's possible. I'd love to explore it with you. Let me know what resonates. Let me know what conversations you want to have, what your organization would benefit most from, and I'll bring the right people to the party. That's it. And that's how I view my role. I am an orchestrator. I'm a broker of relationships. And I just try to add value for anybody that I come in contact with, colleagues, partners, and customers.
I love that, Carson. I think you've really hit on the importance of the art of possible. You know, if you always keep I think one of the biggest things I would tell salespeople is, and what I've noticed is the way that you frame things, the way that you create your attitude. If you keep things positive, if you keep yourself hoping, if you keep working and doing the right activities that pay off. Now, I had a sales rep that I was working with at Google who was struggling, and they were just struggling to get meetings. They were struggling to, show that they were making impact by closing deals, closing business. And, I would have one-on-ones with them on a regular basis. We would talk about the challenges that they were having. And the thing that I sort of landed on with them is that you need to keep doing the right activities. If you keep doing the right activities, eventually it will pay off. Eventually, if you continue to prospect, sending account-based marketing emails that are very custom tailored to each person that you research and send quality information with. If you keep, going on LinkedIn, like you're saying, social selling, which maybe something that Carson you can talk about in a moment is you're obviously the social selling expert, as far as I know. You sort of branded at Microsoft and everywhere else. So it'd be great to hear how social selling can help you in COVID. But use social selling. We continue to smile and dial even as a field sales rep. Doesn't matter if it's an SDR type activity. Get on the phones, make calls. I tell all my salespeople you have to do that. It doesn't matter how senior of a seller you are. You have to get on and make those cold calls as well. Do all these activities, and if you just stay positive and you continue to push through, stay motivated, eventually the right things will happen. You continue to do the right activities for a while. You start to get worried, stressed. I'm not seeing the meetings. I'm not seeing the response. Eventually, I've been talking to him recently. He's been having 5-6 meetings a week. He has multiple deals that are on the table now. He was very thankful to say, hey, you just need to keep staying positive. During COVID, things are difficult. It's harder to get meetings. It's harder to close deals. It's harder to get business. But like I said, don't let COVID define your story. Don't let COVID say what kind of salesperson you are. Don't let COVID take away from the fact that what the right things are to do, the right activities are to do, the right sales things that need to happen to make yourself successful. You keep doing the right things, eventually they will pay off. And that's what I'm a strong believer in for my system. But Carson, let me turn it over to you and say, hey, let's touch on social for a second. What do you think are some things that people can do on the social selling perspective to really help them be successful during COVID as salespeople?
I love it. What you said is so powerful. I wish every seller in the world could see what you just said, because it was right on. It's all about fundamentals. And what's funny about social selling is now it's just selling, because it has to become part of the tool set.
Yeah.
And what you just said about the fundamentals is so critical, because I think sometimes we do our own selves a disservice. We overthink, we start to panic. We look at, I've got a big number that I've got to hit, and I've got to find my crutch, right? It's COVID. I can't succeed because of COVID. Well, absolutely, yes, you can. And you've got to turn off that element of your mind right now and turn it to the fact that sales is a numbers game. It's a contact sport. And if you're talking to 10, 20 people, or even less in some cases at an organization, why not turn up the volume? Reach out to 100 people in that organization. The biggest things that I see, because I think everybody understands the concept of social selling now, but I think the only thing that I do differently than other people is that I probably do more, and I do it more consistently. That's it. Because like you just said, I mean, it's kind of like taking care of a garden. You're planting and you're taking care of that garden by watering it. It's that simple. Eventually something's going to come up. It's not going to happen on your timetable. Very few things in sales or in your career are ever going to happen on the timetable that you desire. Go back to Napoleon Hill and the Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I always go back to Think and Grow Rich, because the mantra of that story is success comes after most people would have given up and accepted failure. And so if you see this through and you're consistent about it and be intentional, I schedule prospecting time for myself, because otherwise I'm going to get pulled in a million different directions too. It happens to all of us, but you've got to find, maybe it's 30 minutes a week or whatever that looks like, or 30 minutes a day, or whatever, 15 minutes a day. Schedule intentional time where you're not going to check your email. You're not going to get caught up in the minutia. You're not going to have a meeting, and you're going to plant in your garden and water your garden. That's it. Because if you're going out there and you are prospecting to people, there's a few things that matter. It's quality and it's quantity. Your quality of your messaging has to be sound. Also, the quantity, increase it. Instead of reaching out to 10, 20 people at an organization, or saying, I've got to talk to the CFO or bust, reach out to 100 people in that organization to get conversations, because the information that you glean from the people that will talk to you will ultimately help you. I was in a really powerful situation not too long ago where I had met a handful of senior people at an organization via LinkedIn. And as I started to have different conversations, organization, some that came naturally, I was able to say, oh, well, this senior executive told me this. Well, it put me in the driver's seat immediately. Oh, wow, you're talking to them. That's fantastic. There was another person I was talking to, and they were like, hey, if we can prove this out, then maybe I'll introduce you to this arm of the business. Oh, you mean this guy? I already know him. I talked to him last week. He said XYZ. Social can put you in a position of strength and power because you're able to connect with some of these folks. And I'll tell you, 60% of the people that I reach out to shut me out. I don't get the connection acceptance. They may not respond to any of my messages, but 40% do. And that has been over tweaking my language and how I approach the outreach. I approach my outreach purely by value. Every company that I've worked at, I've worked at a consulting firm years ago where it was completely cold. And I've worked at organizations where there was already a relationship. But even when there's already a relationship, that company is investing in you today. And the question is, are they seeing the maximum amount of value that you can deliver for their investment? So I go in under that pretense, and I try to bring resources to the table to make sure that they're privy to everything that we could be doing together. And I'm not trying to go in selling anything. Sales are a natural byproduct of a trusting relationship where value is shared and where you understand their motivating factors. If you focus on helping your customer win, you'll win too. And I've always just focused on process. It's hard because in COVID, you've got this almost like this cloud over you sometimes, but you've got to ignore the cloud. And you've got to make sure that you have that mindset where you're taking every moment, every meeting at a time. You're optimizing your time. You're spreading your wings, because in a pre-COVID time, if you were talking to 10 people at an organization, and in a during or post-COVID time, you're talking to 100 people in that organization, which seller do you think is going to win more? The person who's got a lot of relationships, or the one that has a few? Because one way or another, things are going to continue to evolve. Companies are going to change, and they're going to have needs going forward. And if you're their trusted advisor, even if they're not buying something today, they may be 6 months from now. Or a major stakeholder that you work with at an organization may go work someplace else. Well, guess what? Now you're connected to them. So sales is a cyclical thing, and doesn't mean just because you're in the storm now that the skies won't open up and smile upon you in 6 months. Keep with it. Like you said, keep your head up, focus on each day at a time, optimize the day, and you'll get there. It's that simple.
Absolutely, Carson. The key that we've sort of hit on today that I hope that people are paying attention to is those fundamentals, and the fact that you have to focus in on doing the right activities. I like how you sort of emphasize the importance of blocking out time. I think that's a great tip for folks, and not everyone does. I always ask people that are on my team to block out time, not only for that, but you should have time that's blocked out specifically for certain activities to make sure you get them done, whether it's prospecting, whether it's spending time on LinkedIn, reaching out to your customers, building a value add network. Carson, I think for me, the biggest thing for me on social selling is trying to always add value. There's a difference between just being on LinkedIn, posting things or messaging people, and then adding value to those people. Really bring in insights. When you're commenting on something, don't just say, hey, that's cool. Bring a comment. Add value to every conversation that you're bringing. If you want to connect with people, connect with their ideas, connect with what they're trying to share, and have an interesting opinion that brings some insights to the table. I think that's very, very important when you look at social, and when it comes to everything else, just blocking out time to do things, I think makes a difference. I think the second thing I think is important that I've sort of gleaned from what you've just said is, there's a lot of adversity, but adversity is something that can make you stronger if you know how to deal with it. So obviously, has created adversity for a lot of salespeople, and I think that if you sort of use this adversity as a chance to learn and get better, will only make you stronger. There's that quote, you fall so that you learn how to pick yourself back up. And that's really what this is. So even if you are one of those sellers that's really struggled this year and has had difficulties, focus in on the learnings. How has this made you into a better seller? How can you work from this adversity to get better? How can you keep doing these activities, following the schedule to really get to the next level, if that makes sense? One of the other things I want to mention was I once wrote an article about the champion's mindset. You mentioned mindsets just a second ago, Carson. It's on LinkedIn. It's one of the articles that I once posted. But from a perspective of as a champion, you have to have certain things that you think about, and you have to focus in on having a desire to win, being able to want it more than everyone else, being relentless, having a healthy obsession with winning. Then you have to excel. You have to have a laser focus on the goal. You have to be able to always be excellent. They say always be selling. I say always be excellent. Focusing on being excellent in everything that you do, and then being bold. Being bold in your decision making, being bold in what you do. The third area is preparation. Being coachable is so important to be successful. Being able to practice makes perfect. Things like that is, the best athletes, the best people that are champions out there are practicing. Some of the greatest basketball players like Kobe Bryant talked about how he used to go to the gym way before anyone else and would leave after everyone else too. And that's how he was better than everyone else. Rest is important. I think taking care of yourself during this time is very, very important. Having a good balanced schedule, having work-life balance is important. Treating your body like a temple, making sure that you're taking care of yourself. The fourth element that I look at in this mindset is thinking, being mindful. I think mindfulness is very important. And today at Google, there's actually a training that they do for all their employees to teach them mindfulness. And I think if you haven't looked at mindfulness yet, I think it's something you need to look at. Remaining calm under pressure is very, very important. Staying positive is very important. Being disciplined is important. And then being present from that perspective is very important. I think the next element that I try to talk about is sacrifice. Being willing to make sacrifices for your success. You know, even in this time and any time, it's always important to be able to make sacrifices. Then being a great teammate, I think is essential. Playing your role, whatever that is, as a role player, you know, they win championships because they have very specific roles. They might not be the all-star, but they're still a champion because they know their role. Some roles are to be a superstar, and you're going to be Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan's not Michael Jordan without Scottie Pippen. And they're not going to win that game without Steve Kerr to hit the three. So, or Dennis Rodman to pull the rebounds and to be the bad boy. So it depends on the team, and everyone has a role to play. So just know you have a role in the team. And then leading from behind and leading from the front is very important. And keeping it real in terms of being sincere and honest, being organized. I think organization is very, very important. Coming early, leaving late, as we mentioned earlier. And then the next area which I focus in is believing. I think belief is so important. People of faith, Carson, you know, this is something that's core to our tenets, but you have to accept responsibility. You have to believe in things that happen. You have to show no fear, you know, and believe in what's possible. Always obviously believe in yourself and what you can do, and go from there. You know, when you recognize, you know, what your deficiencies are, focus in on those and improve in those things, you're only going to get better. So I think take, whether it's a championship mindset, whether it's a growth mindset, whatever mindset you decide, you know, focus in on these key things, make yourself better, focus in on always improving. No matter what happens, whether there's COVID or no COVID, if you're focused on improvement, focused in on doing the best that you can, focused in on doing the right activities, focused in on really believing that you can make things happen, you'll be surprised by just what that can change. So, I mean, that's just something that I'd add there. Well, Carson, when it comes to mindsets, I know there's a lot out there that are out there, and you know, what specific mindset do you like to sort of focus in on and think adds a lot of value to the way that you do things?
Yeah, I can't top your list because it was amazing, and I think you got to challenge yourself to ask, where can I turn up the dial on some of the areas that you just said. But I can tell you that where my career changed dramatically for the better, I thought that I was really effective as a leader and a seller at a much younger age. But where my career really took off was when I started really proactively looking for where I could selflessly add value to everybody that I interacted with in the food chain. So colleagues, understand how they get paid, what matters to them. You know, if you're working with somebody on the same team, understand their pay structure too. Understand what do they want out of their career. Specifically even with a manager. You know, we all have managers. Some of them are just phenomenal. Some of them, maybe we struggle to get along with them. But no matter what, understand what they care about. What are their motivating factors? Because if you show that you care about that, and you speak to it when you're together, and you proactively look for ways to help them get where they want to get, guess what? Your relationship there is going to get stronger. And then lastly, obviously, and very importantly with a customer, it's the same fundamental. Customers want to win. That's all they care about. And they have very likely tried different methods of doing what you're proposing to do. And some of them have worked, some of them haven't. Well, why is yours different? You know? And I think the problem is we go in a lot of times just trying to say, hey, we've got this and it does this, this, and this. And these are the types of results it's getting for people. Well, you're going in not understanding anything about this customer's history. You don't know anything about what it is going to take to get them to a win, what their responsibilities are. So you got to get to know them first and really invest in that relationship. And I think a lot of times, because, you know, especially right now, because I have the ability to introduce them to people all over a relatively large organization, that's the value that I bring. I can come in and say, look, I represent your team, And I'd love to figure out what conversations you're really going to benefit from. Are there things that you'd like to explore? What are your priorities? What are your pain points? What projects are upcoming? How can I really get at the heart of that and figure out, okay, where might I be able to add value? And especially even like free value. People like it when you come to the table and you say, these are resources that you're entitled to. Let me bring these to the table, because that might get you the discussion. And because you went under that pretense, you can talk about whatever you want. So deliver that value and then start asking discovery questions. You know, fundamentals is what it's all about. And as far as a mindset, have the mindset of being a servant, be it as a servant leader, be it as a person that is going to bring value. You are the evangelist of your brand, and you're your customer's advocate. It's your job to understand what they're going through so that you can go back to your organization and tell that story internally so that you can get resources, more resources to bring to them. That's how deals happen. Deals don't happen because you float a structure and a price that looks like a cookie cutter program. Deals happen because you figure out ways to partner and collaborate. And if you go in under a collaboration mindset and, like you said, a way to make the team work, and you also understand that even with social selling, there's no silver bullet. There's no, you just use LinkedIn and you reach out to people and things are magically going to fall into place. It's all about staying top of mind and staying at the pulse of what's going on with the customer. It could be setting up alerts so that you're alerted every time something happens with that organization and it goes to your email. It could be subscribing to your business journals. It could be customizing your sales navigator feed so that you can see different things that happen with some of these leads, and then you act. You use that as actionable information. It could be maybe your organization has leads or marketing insights or a variety of different things. You've got to set up the platform to make it work. And you can't discriminate against, you know, the 9 other things that could bring you actionable data in order to reach out to a customer with. You know, you've got to understand where they're coming from. And there's 2 ways to do that. One, by keeping up with everything that is going on and the information that you're fed, but also talking to people. And that's why social is so important, because you can create relationships, gather intel, and based on all of that, you can make things happen.
Yeah, Carson, I really like that. And I like that your focus is on the servant mindset, the servant leadership. A lot of people talk about that today, but it's so, so key. You have to think of yourself as a servant, be humble like a servant. And also at the same time, when you're focused in on getting to know people, understanding these people, really focusing in, whether it's your teammates, whether it's your leader, whether it's your customer. I think people don't take enough time to really get to know one another and really understand one another. And I think as a salesperson, that can be a big miss. A lot of salespeople are more interested in what's going to get me over the number, what's going to help me hit my quota or destroy my quota. They're really more focused in on what these numbers are and what this is. They're now looking at things to understand things from others' perspective. And when you don't do that, you're not going to be successful. But if you're the kind of person, Carson, that's focused in on having a servant mindset and really focused in on getting to know people, what makes a difference to these people, and what is going to help these people, most importantly, that's when you start to see difference. That's when you start to see yourself really having success. So completely agree with you on that one, Carson. I think it's an important element that people need to think about.
When I've thrown myself 100% into investing in relationships with people and optimizing my process, I've never had to worry about my results. They've always been there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you do that, it's 100%. 100%.